I just want, this is really not a see what I can play kind of a video. This is one that I really enjoy these sounds, so I want to share them in the easiest, in a way that is the most applicable to how so many of us play. Bluegrass music, blues, whatever, there's a lot of tunes that are 1-4-5, and those 1-4-5 tunes are all chords are all dominant chords. In the blues, for instance, you can say 1-4-5, G, C, D, but in the blues, those are all dominant chord. Those are all 7 chords. Even in happy blues, what I think of happy blues is with a major third in it. Minor blues is more. Those are the kind of, bluesy sounds that you get when you're playing a blues scale. It's not a strict blues scale. I always have extra notes in my blues scale. I look at those as all viable notes when you're playing the blues. But this lesson is about using an altered dominant chord or creating the 5-chord, the most tense 5-chord leading into each chord of a blues. You hear this, these are all very jazzy sounds, very beboppy sounds, and they come right out of traditional jazz, and they're cool sounds that you hear sophisticated, you hear good players use them, and I get, maybe it's just me, but I get very bored listening to a blues scale being played over things because I've just heard it so many times for so many years. That doesn't mean that it's not good. That just means that for me it doesn't have enough tension, interest in it to perk my ears up the way it used to when I was younger. Maybe I'm just old and jaded. Yes, that's what it is. I'm old and jaded. Anyway, let me just show you. You can use this for foggy. What's the tune? That tune. What is that? Foggy Mountain Top? Foggy Mountain something. Okay, anyway. But that's just 12-bar blues. And normally you might play. That's a straight 12-bar blues with no blues. Basically, it's G, C, and D, no flavoring. That's, mashed potatoes, no salt, no pepper, no butter, no gravy. Now, you can play a blues scale over that. Again, cool, no problem, but doesn't have the flavor that it could. I'm not going to throw in all the different alternate turnaround chords that you hear in a lot of jazz blues. These are just standard changes. I'm going to use this one. That's a G13. And then I'm going to use, there's your C7. And all I've really done, it's a C9. And the same thing with the D9. I might do this. Maybe. Anyway, just a nice vanilla dominant chord with an added note in it, like a 13, which is a 6, or a 9, which is a 2. Now the principle here is there's some, if you use a melodic minor scale tension on the 5 chord of each of those chords, you stick with me, we're gonna be thinking in our heads the 5 chord, which is the chord that leads to each of the changes after we start the tune. Every single one of them. Every time we go to a C, we're going to be thinking of a G7 altered. Every time we go to a D, we're going to be thinking of an A7, altered. And when we go back to the G after we've started the tune, we're going to think of a D7, altered. So it's the 5 chord of each of those chords. We're going to find that melodic minor scale, which is just whatever the 5 chord is, go up a half step and play melodic minor. I'm going to play something that's voiced in the area that I'm playing, but that's simply theoretically that's what we're doing here. You're going to hear what a bunch of the great jazz guitar players of this age, like bluesy jazz players is what I'm talking about, like Robin Ford, people like that. But Pat Metheny, you know, John Scofield, they use this tension to get to a chord all the time. So in essence, a lot of times, I'm not telling you what they're thinking, I'm just saying what I have to think is I'm always thinking the 5 chord leading into whatever the next chord, major chord is. I'm always thinking of the tensions that go to that chord, not that I'm going to play that chord or that I'm just staying on a static blues scale. So let's, just for fun, let's look at it. Here's a G7. If I lose you, I'm sorry. But every time I see a G7 that's just static, I'm thinking G Lydian dominant, which happens to be, that's D melodic minor. So every dominant chord, if you go down a fourth, in this case G, you go down to a D and play a melodic minor scale, that's Lydian, gives you a Lydian dominant sound. The C7 would be what? Go down a fourth, G, right? G melodic minor. That's C Lydian dominant. And then D, when you land on the D, it's A Lydian dominant. Melodic minor. That's that sound. But the scales going into each of these chords are, when I'm on the G chord, I'm just playing Lydian dominant. When I'm going to the C7, I'm thinking G7 going into a C7. Remember the 5 chord going into the C7, but I'm thinking G sharp or A flat melodic minor. Back to Lydian dominant. So watch. Watch. Now I'm going back. You hear how that change was? From the G, going to the 4 chord. Now the secret is, basically all you're doing is going a half step up from where you're headed, and then sliding it down a half step, and you're on the right chords. This is G altered, or the altered 5 chord of the C. Slide it down a half step. Now you're on C Lydian dominant. So you hear that chain. Watch. Hear that? Now let's go. Now we're going to go back to the G, but this time we're going to play D altered. Same thing goes true there too. When you play the D altered, E flat melodic minor to a D melodic minor. So you've got G, we're headed towards the G7, but we're coming from a D7 altered. Hear how that works? So basically, that's the idea. If you're going to, if you got this chord, you're basically playing Lydian dominant, G7. But when you're going to this chord, we're going to play G altered, 2. Now we're going back to the 1. We're going to play. When we go to the 5 chord, we're going to be playing an A altered to the D. Now G altered to C to the D altered to the G. Make sense? So that's where those tensions come from. I'm just going to review them real quickly. I'm going, here's the chord I'm going to. Now I'm going to go to it from this place. Right. You hear that? Now here's the chord we're going to. And I'm going to come from here. Here's the 5 chord. That's the chord we're headed towards. But we're coming to it from here. Back to the 1, and we're going to turn this chord into an altered chord. Hear how that works? Now you'll hear guys like Robin Ford use this all the time. Modern jazz fusion players, Scott Henderson, you know, the great players. That's why they call melodic minor, the melodic minor scale, jazz minor. I think I heard that came from Berklee School of Music in Boston, but a lot of people just call it the jazz man's playground. Melodic minor has sounds in it that we just use like crazy, a lot more than what I'm showing you right here. But Lydian dominant and altered are 2 modes of melodic minor, and we use those frequently would be an understatement. All right, have fun with it. I hope that wasn't too terribly confusing. It requires a little bit of work in your head.